Before we jump into this podcast, let's just have a first word from our sponsors, NordVPN, the fastest VPN in the world and an absolute essential travelling companion. You can use NordVPN on 10 devices with just one account, easily switching your virtual location to access apps and websites in other countries. But if you're out of the country, make sure that you've got NordVPN to be able to use your subscriptions and watch the live sport that you might miss. If you're at home, use it to see if you can save money with products that might be cheaper in another region. Go to nordvpn.com/Manchester to get 4 extra months on the 2-year plan. The link is also in the podcast description. Hello and welcome to the Manchester is Red podcast. My name is Steven Railston, back on today's episode to host alongside Samuel Luckhurst. Samuel, before we get into the football, how's yourself?
I'm very well, thank you. Yes, it doesn't feel like it's a new season because it just feels like a continuation of last season with all the football that's been crammed in between. But at least United look different, look fresher, look newer, and hopefully it is a very different and fresher season after last season. But still feeling invigorated for the new season, despite, as I said, it just feeling like a complete continuation of last season.
And the post-season trip definitely didn't help that, but the sun is shining here in Salford. The football is back. I'm feeling very positive, and the mood around United is very positive at the moment, Samuel. It's been an encouraging summer, some good signings made, a positive pre-season. But we'll start today with your story about Carlos Baleba, because I think supporters have been desperate for an update on him. Ruben Amorim has wanted to strengthen his midfield options. That seemed like the next step after securing 4 players. But your story is that United are prepared to delay a move for Baleba until next year. So should we discuss that a little bit before we get into Arsenal on Sunday afternoon?
Of course, yeah. Of course. I was told about 2 months ago, in fact, that not told. In fact, I think I was talking to someone about Mbumo, and they said, "Oh, what about Baleba?" And I thought, well, he's good, but if you can get Mbumo, are you going to get Baleba as well? And then, of course, it's turned out that United have gone in for Baleba as well. But that has always seemed quite fanciful, to put it politely, particularly when they've just invested more than £200 million in the attack. But it's understandable that he's a player of interest. The word from United is that they're not completely killing it. In terms of saying that deal is stone dead, nothing's going to happen, but they accept it is very unlikely that anything will happen over the next two and a bit weeks. With a deal like that, if they were to somehow do it, I mean, but Baleba, there's already been a precedent set with Moises Caicedo, a brilliant midfielder that Brighton bought on the cheap, and then they sold a couple of years later for a British record fee of £115 million. With Baleba, he is not quite valued at the same amount, but it is still 9 figures. He's still, Brighton looking at £100 million deal for him, which is extremely difficult to finance. And that was what the source told me quite a while ago, that it was just too difficult a deal for United to maybe do this summer. They don't have as much headroom to do something with their midfield as they have done with their attack, where they are budgeting to have quite a few players off the wage bill. Obviously, with Sancho, Antony and Garnacho, they all still need to go, but I think there's quiet confidence with United that they will go. It's just one of those things that I think from the outset, it was likely that the majority of those wingers were going to depart in late August or the final week of the transfer window, or on deadline day, perhaps. I think it was a really good result for United, in fact, that Marcus Rashford went as early and as quickly as he did, because that was another deal that you could see dragging on and him having to wait for someone to come in, which was the case in January when Aston Villa ended up signing him. And I think that deal actually went through technically in February, because for some reason the first 3 days of February was still live with the winter transfer window. But Rashford was fortunate in that Barcelona looked at Nico Williams, who decided to stay at Athletic Bilbao, and then it was Luis Diaz, who they weren't prepared to go to the amount that Liverpool wanted for him. Plan C was Marcus Rashford, and that's why that Barcelona were able to get it done quite quickly. and United will save about £14 million, where Rashford's wages are being covered in full by Barcelona over the next year. And they've made other savings at the club with the redundancies, of course, with getting some players off the wage bill in January. They've made a little bit of cash from sell-on clauses and the penalty fee that Chelsea had to pay for Jadon Sancho. There was always going to be a relatively big pot of money there to sign one or two players. Ideally for them, it would have been Cunha and Liam Delap. It's not worked out that way. I think a lot of United fans are pretty pleased it's not worked out that way. They've got Mbumo in as well, where again there was some sort of a deadline there in terms of wanting to get him on board for the pre-season tour, and they made that happen in the end. And the fee is a little bit steep overall, you would say, £71 million, but I don't think it's a disastrous amount of money that they've paid, and £65 million up front, I think is pretty. Again, a precedent was set with Cunha, and Cunha was only worth that much because of release clause. And Mbumo scored more goals than him last season, and Mbumo's played in the Premier League for longer. He's slightly younger as well. When you weigh it up, paying a few £1 million more up front for him, and staggering that payment over a period of time, it's far from a disaster. I think it's United used the word sensible regarding a fee for Mbumo, and I think that is sensible. I still think that applies. But with Baleba, we know how good Brighton are at selling players, how high they can go and demand for a fee, and how in Caicedo's case he was probably the most coveted midfielder along with Declan Rice in the Premier League at the time that he left. Rice went for, was it £100 million or £105 million? Caicedo was 115, both in the same summer. It does feel a bit of a travesty that United allowed both those players to slip the net, and they are the cost of that summer, if you like, or the cost of not signing one of these elite defensive midfielders is still being felt, because just as recently as the last two pre-season friendlies, they've struggled in midfield, whether it's Ugarte and Mainu playing there, whether it's Fernandes with Casemiro. It's interesting over the course of pre-season that Casemiro has actually started more games than Ugarte has. Ugarte's had a very up and down pre-season. I thought he was very good against West Ham. I thought he was very poor against Everton. In Atlanta, come Sunday, I feel it's got to be Ugarte who starts that game, because Casemiro just is not going to be up to it over the course of a Premier League season. Perhaps he'll defy me, perhaps he'll prove me wrong, and that would be good for United, but they need to try and make something work with Ugarte. But the fact that they're already looking at a different defensive midfielder for the long term is not a ringing endorsement of Ugarte, who I certainly had reservations about in terms of the profile that they were going for last year, of opting for someone who's playing in Liga. The fact that PSG wanted rid of him, those were a couple of red flags there. The manager wasn't aligned with the choice of Ugarte as well at the time, and you thought with Amram coming in, it would have perked him up, and there were one or two decent performances, but overall he was probably the most disappointing of the five summer signings last year, I would argue. And particularly given the way the season ended for him, with Casemiro starting ahead of him in the Europa League final, that did not reflect well on him at all. So I fully understand United wanting a midfielder. I still think they will have to try. I mean, they need one to come in with Toby Collier on his way out and going to West Brom, it looks like. I've been off for a few days, but obviously I've been following your stories and what's going on there. From what I gather, I think Collier's rather reluctantly going to the Championship. I mean, he's still got to take it as a compliment. It's that unwritten or unspoken rule that if United send an academy player on loan to the Championship, they think that they've got a half decent chance of coming back into the first team and doing well back at United. But ultimately, they are, with or without Collier, they're really light in midfield. And in pre-season, Bruno Fernandes was papering over the cracks in that area. He could do it again. I wouldn't put it past him to paper over the cracks from that area over the course of another season, but they really need Kobbie Mainoo to step up, Manuel Ugarte to step up. And those two are capable of it, because we saw them do it against Liverpool at Anfield. And a week later, I think they played very well against Arsenal in the FA Cup third round. Those two performances were two of United's best performances last season, even though they didn't win either of the games outright. The performance at Anfield was their best at Liverpool in 10 years. The Arsenal performance was so spirited and so gutsy given the circumstances of being down to 10 men for about an hour of that 2-hour game and then coming through it on a penalty shootout. So those two in Manu and Ugarte, there is potential there, but it's not worked out as people would have hoped or liked. And I think they only started 10 games together in midfield last season. So that tells you a lot about the state of flux United are in midfield. And it really is a season that Bruno Fernandes is going to have to play in midfield more often than as one of the number 10s.
I got the text on Toby Collier's move to West Brom. I think it was around 10:30 yesterday. Just waiting for it to be double sourced. I think Laurie had beaten me by 2 minutes to get out there. So there's a lesson there for myself. Maybe tweet and don't give the article the priority. Your story was probably good timing this morning, Samuel, because Fabian Herzl has come out at the press conference and he said that he is very confident that Carlos Baleba will not leave Brighton this summer. He actually used the words very, very confident. He said, I didn't see any change in him. He seems to be in a very good place, enjoying it with his teammates. And he also confirmed to be available tomorrow against Fulham after missing a few games with a knee injury in pre-season. I think it's an important point what you made just there, Samuel, about if Baleba isn't the man, they potentially do still need a midfield reinforcement, don't they? When we've watched them this summer, and we obviously watched them last season, they've been kind of screaming out for someone in that role. And as you said, that does not reflect well on Ugarte, considering it was 50 million euros invested in him last summer. 12 months later, United are already looking to invest in his position. His performances have been mixed. Some have been good, some not so good. But he's truly kind of failed to convince and nail down that role. And the fact that we're already saying that United need another player of his ilk, again, does not reflect well.
Well, there's been a deal that I think it happened while I was away on the tour. So when you're in that bubble, when you're in the United bubble anyway, it's difficult to keep abreast of the comings and goings at other clubs. But when I saw that João Palhinha had gone to Tottenham on loan, I thought, why have United not done that deal? He's someone who actually played under Amorim. I thought he was brilliant for Fulham in the Premier League, so he's Premier League proven. Playing for Bayern Munich, United have a very good relationship with Bayern Munich, dealt with them several times. They've signed 3 of their players within the last 3 years. He's a defensive midfielder. That makes a hell of a lot of sense, I'd have thought. Okay, he's had 1 season at Bayern, it's not gone to plan, but I don't think that's a disaster necessarily. There's always mitigation there. And yes, maybe I'm contradicting myself, like a player who played under the manager, and do you want to take the cast off from Bayern Munich? There is a bit of the Ten Hag going on there. But I rated him before he went to Bayern Munich. I think when we had our troika of directors of football, you, me, and Rich Fay, I think Palhinha was one of those players that we thought, if we were reassembling a new Manchester United, we'd want to recruit him. And I think Rich has got a decent enough memory that he would recall that as well. And I mentioned it to an agent, and they said, well, I think United just want someone to buy outright rather than get someone in on a loan deal, even though that Palhinha deal looks really... from Tottenham's perspective, I think it's really advantageous because there's an option to buy at the end of it for only £27 million. He's a little bit older than I thought. I didn't realise he's already 30, but at this point, beggars can't be choosers. And yes, I think you look at the age that United have recruited, certainly under Ineos. The average age has got to be something like 24, I would think. That the oldest player that they've signed, would it have been... I think it might have been Cunha maybe at 26. Sesko's obviously 22. Aidan Heaven's still a teenager. So is Lenny Yoro. It might have been Mazraoui, in fact. I think Mazraoui's 27. So he's of the players they've signed, he's the oldest. So that probably is quite telling. I think that there's definitely a conscious decision to avoid players who are coming to the tail end of their career. But again, I think Palhinha would have been a signing that would have made eminent sense. And United have done it a couple of times already this summer. They've bought players that I thought, they should absolutely be going for that player. The lad on the door at the Old Trafford press box, Luke. I've even got the message to prove it. I think when we were trying to trying to map out the plan for the new United and what our 11 could look like for this season. This was a back and forth, maybe back in January. We did literally have Cunha and Mbumo in the starting 11, so we've done all right. Although that said, I think we had Alphonso Davies as our left winger, and then a couple of months later he signed a new contract at Bayern Munich, so that didn't quite come off. But two big players isn't bad going with those two coming to fruition. But with the midfield situation, while we were on tour, I think a couple of colleagues got carried away because United had played well in attack, and they thought, maybe save the money on the striker and just go all out for a midfielder. They absolutely needed a striker. We don't need to cover that ground anymore that they did. And there are pros and cons of them settling on Sesko, and he wouldn't have been my choice, but they absolutely needed a striker. They needed a striker who's got good pedigree, who was going to be attainable this summer. There have been a lot of strikers on the move. There's still obviously another big striker who wants to be on the move, but whether he will or not from Newcastle to Liverpool remains to be seen. But United had to get someone in. They couldn't ignore that area. And they've probably not overspent the attack, but certainly exceeded my expectations of how much they'd invested in it. To have responded to a -10 goal difference by investing more than £200 million in three forwards is quite the statement. And you think, fair enough.
Well, it makes sense, doesn't it? Yeah,
you can't. Yeah, you can't.
Goals, Premier League.
That's the way to react after -10 goal difference and finishing 15th, and it was their lowest goals tally, wasn't it, in the Premier League season as well. The number 9 got 4 Premier League goals. You can't accept that. You've got to be making pretty seismic changes there, and they've done that to the tune of more than £200 million, and that's going to be their new front three as well. You would imagine. So we'll see if they line up together. I'd like to think they will on Sunday. I think they should do, but further back, obviously that midfield area, it's not in rude health. And it was quite telling that when Toby Colley did actually get a start during pre-season, not to my mild surprise, because I'd got the tip just before kickoff that he was going to start as a number 10, but he started as a number 10. So it was a curious choice by Amorim, but another telltale sign that he's not completely convinced or certain of that midfield area.
There's just over a fortnight to go now in the summer transfer window, and 4 members of the bomb squad are still here: Garnacho, Antony, Sancho and Malacia. It probably says it all about those players that they're still at the football club. Garnacho at least has been attracting interest, and again, Samuel did a story this morning about some Champions League clubs potentially rejecting a move for Garnacho. Do you want to briefly touch on that? And as well, there has been some contacts. Roma have touched base with United on Sancho, so perhaps there actually is going to be some movement on that in the next week or so. It's a loan with an obligation that's been discussed with £20 million, very similar to the structure of the deal that was negotiated with Chelsea. But of course, Chelsea made the kind of very embarrassing move of paying a penalty fee to United, which is £5 million, not to fulfil that obligation to sign Sancho.
Well, I think I wrote in June that Sancho was targeting a move to Italy. That was his escape route, if you like, which is not a surprise because a lot of English players have ended up in Italy in recent years, and it has become a dumping ground for United, dating back to Ole Gunnar Solskjaer's first summer when Chris Smalling went there, Matteo Darmian went there, Alexis Sanchez as well. Then later on down the line, Ashley Young, Romelu Lukaku. I'm forgetting that there have been a lot of players, not just English players, but players based in the Premier League who've ended up in Italy because it's a league that's been in decline for 20 years. The clubs there, although it's kind of skewed by the fact that Inter Milan got to a couple of Champions League finals, let's face it, in the second of them, they were absolutely embarrassed, and they were embarrassing. It was the record defeat, record victory in a European Cup final. They made a decent fist of it against City in 2023, but I don't think people are being hoodwinked by Inter Milan getting to a couple of European Cup finals. The Italian league is just not what it was, certainly when I was growing up watching Gazzetta Football Italia, and it was the league, it was the glamour league that the best players in the world did play there, and it did feel quite untouchable as well at the time, with Juventus in their pomp in the 90s and Milan in the 2000s as well, under Carlo Ancelotti, and almost threatening to monopolise the Champions League with their record over a 4 or 5 year period. But it does offer salvation for players now, and English players, and there are some English players who have. I mean, Ruben Loftus-Cheek played for England at a World Cup. It's easy to forget. Fikayo Tomori was being talked about as why is he not in the England squad? He should always be in the England squad. You don't hear about those guys getting a look in for England now, yet they play for AC Milan, who are the most successful Italian club when it comes to European honours. They've won 7 European Cups. They're probably possibly the most glamorous Italian club, yet they're a fading force. They're not in Europe this season, and they're such a fading force that they like the look of Rasmus Højlund. They're prepared to sign Rasmus Højlund. So that's how in decline the league has been, which is convenient. Sorry, not convenient. It's useful for a club like United when you've got cast-offs to get rid of. That is always an option. But with Sancho, it's always bound to be. It was always going to go to late August. He is a hard sell, to the point that a club has paid money not to sign him, having had him on loan for a year. That's how hard a sell he is. So he was never ever going to stay in the Premier League. With Garnacho, I was told that Tottenham, Arsenal, and Tottenham, Arsenal, and Atletico Madrid all did due diligence on him, all gave consideration to signing him, and after the due diligence decided no, he wasn't for them. Chelsea, on the other hand, have decided he is for them, which, given the reputation of Chelsea as a club, read into that.
Well, who isn't for Chelsea these days? I mean, they're saying absolutely everyone, don't they?
Yeah, we have to, but we also have to be a little bit careful in terms of what we say about them. But with Garnacho, I think there are, in terms of due diligence, there are obviously a couple of blots on his copybook from his 5 years at United, and there are other examples of what a player you'd be getting there. He scored the winner in the Youth Cup final. He scored in the FA Cup final two years later.
Do you think sorry, Samuel? Do you think it's just immaturity with Garnacho? Because
he's extremely immature. Yeah.
And do you think it's a case of, as he does mature and he develops in his career, this kind of behaviour will be stamped out and he'll become a better professional? Because it's obviously been very disappointing to see over the last 2 years, and his brother has definitely not helped. It's kind of the social media stuff on the side. I mean, it's just unwelcome background noise, isn't it?
Yeah, his brother's a bit of a prat, to say the least. And Garnacho is 21. He's going to make mistakes at that age. Me at 21, I was not a fully fledged adult by any means. I probably thought I was at the time, but I definitely made mistakes and didn't always do the right thing. That's to be expected. I think Garnacho's advice has been dreadful, though, in terms of overseeing his lack of maturity, his immaturity, and not nipping it in the bud, whether it's liking a post that undermines a manager, whether it's posting something daft on an Instagram story after you've come back from a post-season tour, or wearing an Aston Villa shirt with Rashford's name on the back and posting it on your Instagram account. He looks like a bit of a prat doing things like that.
Just take his passwords away. Take his phone away.
Carlos Gambero and Enrique de Lucas, his agents, they clearly couldn't care less about it because as far as they're concerned, they probably see it as somewhat advantageous for themselves, and that it pushes them closer to the exit. And look, those two were at Chelsea. They're at Stamford Bridge in the winter transfer window to, I think, gauge the temperature on the chances of getting Garnacho out of United. At the time, Chelsea is still very much interested in Garnacho. There are no hard feelings from Amrin's perspective. It's just one of those things that I put it to him during our sit down. I said, do you not consider it a pity that it's not worked out? Because it didn't even feel it. I think it was quite apparent that from both sides they tried to make it work. And there were some bumps in the road when he got dropped from the Derby squad, and he didn't take kindly to being substituted in the first half against Ipswich. I thought it was the wrong decision to take him off in that Ipswich game after Patrick Dorg, who got sent off. But United won the game in the end, so it diffused the situation somewhat. I didn't agree with putting him on the bench for the Europa League final and starting Mason Mount ahead of him whatsoever. I thought that was absolutely the wrong decision, and Garnacho came on and did more than most that night in terms of trying to salvage the evening for United. But I also knew going into that game that he was going to be on the bench because of the team at Chelsea 5 days earlier. And Garnacho clearly didn't, because he went out and got his hair bleached because he was going to play in a European final for Manchester United, but he couldn't see the wood for the trees. He thought he was going to start in that game. But my piece from Stamford Bridge was pretty much that he was in trouble here, because he came on, didn't cover himself in glory for Marc Cucurella's winner, got bollocked by Harry Maguire and Bruno Fernandes. The team that night just felt like that was going to be the team for the final. And there was only one change, which was Lenny Oro for Victor Lindelof. And of course, he reacted badly to it, cast out on his future in the immediate aftermath. And Amrim told him a couple of days later, right, you can go. That's it. So if United, say he started the Europa League final and United won it, I don't think we'd be talking about Garnacho's future. I think his future would be pretty secure at United. But that one evening and how it panned out, that pretty much burned his bridges at United, and that's why he's training at a separate time to the rest of the first team squad at Carrington, and he's still got his locker in that new dressing room in the new hub that they opened last week and gave us the tour of. But I imagine it will get changed very soon. And it looks, I think, the way the names appear, I think they're digitally generated, so it's not like the builders have to come in and take all this stuff down or anything like that. I think it would be very easy to change his name.
Well, I'm at the barber's tonight when I finish work ahead of the weekend, and I'm thinking about getting my hair bleached as well for the opening Premier League game of the season. What do you think?
I think you'd end up looking like a bearded Eminem, so I wouldn't necessarily recommend it. But
you turn some heads, wouldn't you, in the press box on Sunday afternoon?
Literally stand out, yeah. Well, there was someone else turning heads in the press box last week, and that was Simon Peach, but it had nothing to do with his hairdo. It had everything to do with him celebrating Southampton's 2 added time goals to win it against Wrexham. So that meant that Rich Fay, even though he was absent that day, and Nathan Salt, they both got a mention in the press box, but there were 1 or 2 expletives added when they were mentioned.
A hungover Simon Peach. I expect better from him on Sunday afternoon, because Arsenal are making the trip to Old Trafford, Samuel. It's second against 15 from last season in the Premier League, but we're expecting both sides to be hopefully a lot closer this time around. If they're not, something has gone hugely wrong again at United. Obviously, Amram, as I said in the opening segment, has been back this summer with 4 signings. They obviously need some new faces through the door, particularly midfield. But Cunha and Buemo Sesko, as you just discussed, very, very exciting, potentially exciting front three. United could potentially go from having one of the worst attacks in the Premier League to one of the best, in my opinion. That is obviously dependent on Sesko really hitting the ground running. But with Cunha and Buemo, you've got 2 really Premier League proven players there who have showed their quality, and they should be perfect for those number 10 roles. Do you think all 3 will start? Because that's probably the question. Will Amram start Sesko on the opening day of the season?
I hope so. And I still think he should do, because Sesko's been in Manchester for a week now. He arrived last Thursday, I think it was. And he's had a week of training. His first training session was on Sunday, so he's had a proper dedicated week for them to really knock him into shape, coach him to within an inch of his life to get him up to speed. And also, you look at that Arsenal team on Sunday, who's going to be at the front of it. It's going to be Victor Gyökeres. United have to have their striker starting. Arsenal are going to have their new striker starting. It's a pretty fascinating matchup. It's racking my brains. It's really, really difficult to recall two big clubs in the Premier League and the opening weekend coming up against each other with 2 number 9s, new number 9s. I think it was Simon Peach who mentioned that it was Haaland against Nunez in 2022, but that was the Community Shield when it was played rather incongruously at the King Power Stadium rather than at Wembley. But I'm not too sure they both started that game. Maybe Nunez did look good, but maybe he came on as a substitute. But to have 2 players, 2 goal scorers who have gone for big money in the same summer, in the same month, a couple of weeks apart. One plays for the biggest club in England. Arsenal are one of the biggest clubs in England. Opening weekend of the season, that is quite the matchup. And I think United have to play Sesko because there is not an alternative, really. I know Joshua Zirkzee is back in in team training, but Amrim doesn't consider him a number 9. I don't think many people consider him a number 9. He's not started a game.
What about Mason Mount in the false 9 rule, Samuel? That's obviously the logical choice,
Well,
isn't it? The Premier League season.
If you hadn't interrupted, I'd have got onto that. But Xerxes not started a game friendly or competitive since Newcastle away when he did his hamstring. He's not had a kick in pre-season, and he's not a number 9, so it's not exactly someone who should really come into the conversation there. How Mason Mount starting there, unfortunately, it reminded me of Christian Eriksen starting as a false 9 on the opening weekend of the season against Brighton 3 years ago, and we'll remember how that went and how badly it went as well, as United lost 2-1. It always seems they lose at home to Brighton, but back then it wasn't. It didn't happen every season, but I think that was the start of it. Cunha, I don't think you should be playing him there. I wouldn't want to see him playing there. Mbumo, of course, had a stint there as well in the second half last week. None of these playmakers have looked up to it. It's been pointlessly experimental. Rasmus Højlund is a striker, but I think he'll struggle to get a kick for United again after he just warmed the bench last week. It was the first pre-season game that he didn't come on in, which was extremely telling, given that United want rid of him. I know, I think I saw a colleague say United insist they're not forcing him out. Well, no. I mean, they kind of are, aren't they? I get that they want to be diplomatic, and there are one or two people who are happy to carry that message for them, but they've signed a striker to replace Højlund. People close to Højlund told me that realistically, if Sesko comes in, then Højlund has to go. And the fact that he wasn't even used last week, it speaks volumes. So there's not really someone who should be realistically starting instead of Sesko up front for United. I mean, is there even any point mentioning Chido Obi? He's still 17. He's so raw. It's just going to be a season for him to spend with the first team and continue to learn his trade, and then they'll, I'm sure, reassess what's best for him next season come the summer. But I'd be starting Sesko. It kind of annoys me, in fact, when clubs, they sign a new player and it's a really big player, and then they just put him on the bench for the first game. I remember Ferguson did it with Van Persie, the first United season at Everton, and he played an extremely unfit Wayne Rooney up front, and Rooney was almost always dreadful at going back to Goodison Park as well. He hardly ever played well there. And Van Persie had just signed from Arsenal. You think, just hit the ground running, get him up front. No, United lost 1-0 to a Marouane Fellaini header. Next game, Fulham at home, Rooney's dropped, Van Persie comes in, first chance he gets, and he volleys it into the corner, and he's up and running. And that's why they signed him. He was a world-class striker at the time. He was the best striker in the Premier League. So why wouldn't you start your best striker and the best striker in the Premier League? I know Sesko has got some way to go to attain that status, but that's what United want him to get to. So he's got to get up and running as soon as possible. I'd much rather have him on from the start than bring him on in the game anyway.
You failed to mention the possibility of playing Kobbie Mainoo down the middle, just like he did against Crystal Palace in February.
Well, they did. The irony is they actually started that game really, really well. The first 10 or 15 minutes, he hit the post as well, didn't he? They had a couple of good chances. But when you get beaten 2-0 at home to Palace and you've got both the £108.5 million worth of strikers on the bench and nobody's scoring, then it's safe to say that experiment was never going to get resurrected.
I think some of the players have joked about that on social media as well. I think Harry Maguire's uploaded the photo of Mainoo before with the caption "fantastic striker" or something along those lines. Let's get back into the midfield then, because we've discussed the need for a reinforcement in that area. Is it going to be Fernandes and Ugarte? It probably seems the most logical selection. In the pivot, Casemiro wouldn't start for me. And you hate the word pivot. Should we have a debate on why you don't like the word pivot?
Do you know what? I was told by an analyst in the summer, they were talking about that Will Still Monday Night Football segment, which essentially, Southampton watched that and thought, he sounds like Russell Martin. Let's hire another pretentious manager. But this analyst even said, even the phrase half space, he said, I'm an analyst in football. I don't use the phrase half space. He was despairing at some of the language, the new
I'm on
way.
board with that, but I'm not. I mean, pivot's perfectly acceptable to me. It's
There
just
was
an
a
easier
brilliant.
way to say two in deep midfield, isn't it?
I had to. The BBC did something earlier in the year about these guff phrases that have come into football and whether they were acceptable or not. It was a really, really good and amusing write-up. They got, I think it was Pat Nevin and Chris Sutton to comment on them. It's almost like two grumpy old men, which I can be when it comes to stuff like that. But I've kind of warmed to Chris Sutton in recent years, and that he does. Yeah, and reading his thoughts on some of these new phrases that are coming in, I did think this could be me writing it. In fact, it was pretty amusing. But it's certainly worth looking that up on the BBC. It's just, I suppose, if you were to Google news searches, football, BBC, Chris Sutton, that would be the top hit. But yes, the midfield partnership for United on Sunday, it really should be. It should be Ugarte and Fernandez, as far as I'm concerned. We'll be speaking to Amrim at Carrington in 2.5 hours or something like that. So maybe he'll drop some unwanted team news. And I know everyone's going to be asking about their, who should I put in my fantasy Premier League team this weekend. I've seen one of our colleagues has already put something in the pack WhatsApp group as well to say, join my league this year. We all know who it is who does it every year. I will not be joining that league. You may, Stephen, but I won't be. But there'll be some, obviously, hopefully there's no untoward team news and everyone's fit and available. And then United can, I suppose, they can play their strongest team, can't they? Apart from maybe Lisandro Martinez, who of course will not be ready this weekend, and I think it's fair to consider him when he's at his optimum a starter in that Manchester United back three. But otherwise, there's the opportunity to play the strongest possible 11. Aidan Heaven went down with an injury, didn't he, in the second half last week? So maybe there'll be an update on him. I'm not too sure if he's cropped up in the training imagery that was released.
I thought it was cramp at first. Obviously, we were right next to it, but it might have been an injury in the end. Kobbie Mainoo's obviously played in the deeper midfield role, in the pivot across summer. After playing in the kind of number 10 role a lot under Amram last season and playing at striker, he played all over the place. I was impressed with some of his performances, but he probably didn't do enough to start on the opening day, did he? But I think he really does need a settled role in Amram's system, because I think getting shifted around, it's really hard to build momentum and to build rhythm. So I think if Amram finally decides, right, that is Mainoo's role, we could see him get back to his very best this season, because he was disrupted with a few injuries. And again, I don't think that kind of tweaking of his role really helped him give the best account of himself.
I was encouraged more by what I heard than what I saw regarding Mainoo during the tour, in that Amram said at his first press conference at Soldier Field, he said, I'm on top of him about his rhythm and pace. That tells you that's not a coach looking at a player and thinking, let's get him out the door, let's cash in on him. That's someone looking at a player thinking, there's a player there that can make me look better, because he'll make the team better, and that I can make better as well. And then when I think Mainoo was brought up during the sit down, just rather impromptu, and he was almost purring about him. He said, like, if he just quickens his feet, it was as if to say, if he gets quicker on the ball, you've got a hell of a player there. And he is a hell of a player when he's on it. He wasn't last season very often. It was a difficult second season for a number of reasons. He had a couple of bad injuries, and then obviously the change of manager. Ten Hag had done a hell of a lot for him. Giving him his debut, putting him on the bench for the first time, the winter training camp in Cadiz, being there for his contract signing, how important Mainoo became in Ten Hag's second season as well, of course, and scoring that virtuoso winner in the FA Cup finals. It was always going to be difficult. And then, of course, the change of system. Is it right for him? Is it not right for him? Is he a playmaker? Is he a midfielder? You said earlier as well, of course, he played up front against Crystal Palace, which didn't go well. And you make allowances for someone who's 19 turning 20, and they go through a season like that. And at the start of this season, it's tricky as well, because he's not a certain starter. I think there would be an element. I think it'd be rather surprising if he was to start against Arsenal on Sunday. But is he a player that United should absolutely be getting tied down on a new long-term contract? Yes. Should he be integral to Amrim's plans going forward? Yes. And it's up to Mainu, it's up to Amrim to really make it work. He's clearly not as disruptive or as puerile as Alejandro Garnacho is, and hopefully I'm not tempting fate there, and it doesn't take a turn for the worse. But I think in terms of Kobbie Mainoo's character, there have not been any problems there whatsoever so far, and I'm sure that will continue to be the case, and I hope it will be the case as well. And if he does, I think the criticism, the constructive criticism from Amrim about him needing to be quicker is completely valid, because there are times where, Ty, called it. It was a nice turn of phrase by Ty last season when he said, Mainoo, he's often at the scene of the crime, and that he can be off the pace a little bit. And the midfield obviously is an area that United need to shore up a little bit more and make an adjustment to. And it will be easier next year when Casemiro's off the books, unless they trigger their 1 year extension, his contract, and keep him there for another year. But you'd think that sense would prevail, and this will be his last season. Then they do have the headroom to do something else with the midfield next year. You don't know how much longer Bruno Fernandes is going to be there as well. His contract's up in 2027, and he gave serious consideration to leaving this summer as well. But Mainoo although he's going to start the season on the bench, he's got to be and will be an important player for United going forward. And if he does get quick, and I agree with Amrim, there are times when he can be a little bit. One of the reasons why he reminds me of a Barcelona midfielder is because of the way he operates as well. It's the pace he operates at. He's got the dexterity, absolutely. He's got that fleet of foot. But he does look like a player who came through the Barcelona academy, where the pace is a little bit more sedate. And I've absolutely no doubt that if say he signed for Barcelona, he would tear it up in La Liga. There are other teams out there that I'm sure he would absolutely enhance, which is why I really hope that United don't get to a point where they think, he's great for PSR, let's cash in on him. They shouldn't be thinking like that with him whatsoever. They need to be making it work with him, because the talent is there. There are some adjustments to be made, some modifications, and they've got time on their side. He's got time on his side. He's only 20. He is still developing. He's still maturing as a footballer. And look, what we've seen so far, I don't think it was a flash in the pan. That those 8 months he had when he came into the team in late November and was absolutely phenomenal at Goodison Park. And I remember writing the piece from that game, which of course was the Garnacho overhead kick game. I said that this game deserves to be remembered as much for Kobbie Mainoo's full debut for Manchester United as it does for one of the greatest goals scored by a Manchester United player, frankly.
Yep, and that's saying something considering Garnacho's goal that day at Goodison Park.
Yeah.
Me and Ty got into that debate quite a bit on the midweek debate, rest in peace, the midweek debate, about Mainoo kind of being on the scene of the crime. I just thought it was slightly harsh because the system really was dysfunctional. I think we got into it quite a bit, really, and I kind of argued that if Mainoo has a high-quality partner in the pivot in Amrim's system. So, for example, Casemiro in his first season, then I think it could really work. But to make it work, they're going to have to sign that player. Potentially that is Baleba. Could Baleba and Mainoo work in those roles? I think that could kind of be a good partnership. But at the moment, there are obviously doubts about the options for those roles. And I think it's clear as day to see that when you watch United, and hopefully it's not a problem this weekend against Arsenal. Andrew Onana could be back in time, Samuel. He's been recovering from a hamstring injury throughout the summer. He picked it up pretty immediately after reporting for pre-season, which was unfortunate, but he could be back in between the sticks. And I guess another talking point as well is I saw some people have Diogo Dalot in their expected kind of starting 11s. But if you look at who started in pre-season, Fernandes and Ahmad were the only players who started every single game. And Ahmad started predominantly at right wing back. He played in the number 10 role. Was it against... it was out in the States. I can't remember who it was against, but he did make one appearance, one start on that role. So that suggests that he will start at right wing back. And it'll be interesting to see how that develops this season, because obviously that is a very attacking option. And against sides like Arsenal, who are bound to have a lot of the ball, who are bound to create chances, that is going to pose a challenge for Ahmad defensively.
Yeah, but as you said, he's started the five pre-season games. That's how important he is, and we know just how vital he is to Amrim, and look at his development under Amrim, and he was him and Fernandes were the best players last season. He might have won the Player of the Year award had he not got injured in February. I think he was playing that well, and the trajectory was that promising at that time. He signed a contract in January as well. Amrim has played him as a 10. He's played him on the wing. You go back to Amrim's first game in charge. I think Ahmad played on the right wing. Amrim's had 5 wingers at United, and there's only one that he's trusted to play in that role, which is Ahmad. He didn't trust Garnacho there, didn't trust Rashford there. Anthony played there once or twice just in cup games, just to give him playing time, really, ahead of going on loan to Real Betis in the winter. Sancho, of course, was never going to be in Amrim's plans, and quite rightly so. So that really, that is testament to Ahmad's character and his just how diligent he is, that he's made it work as a winger. Because I've said this so many times, people must be getting sick and tired of it. Those wide roles are not wing back roles; they're wingers. They've got to be servicing the striker. You're not going to have Ahmad playing as a wing back, just playing conservatively. He's going to be darting into the penalty area. He's going to be providing service for the striker.
But they are needed defensively as well, Samuel, aren't they? There is a lot of defensive work in those roles.
Yeah. But look, Amrim has shifted there already, because I was adamant that you can't have 2 fullbacks in those roles. And when Amrim came in, he said it's going to be 2 fullbacks in those roles, and it didn't work. And I know he could only do what he could with the pieces he had to play, but he did play Ahmad there a few times. And now you look at those 2 roles. I know Dorgu is a left back by trade, but he had to. He played like a winger during pre-season, and that pre-season tour form. The challenge for him is to obviously transition that to competitive matches. And look, those 2 are clearly 2 very, very good athletes as well. If you're playing those wide roles, you are going to be running up and down. They're probably the 2 most demanding roles in the team in terms of the workload you have to put in, the shift you have to put in. You're going to have to be pretty tireless. And those 2 do look really fit. If it's Dalot who's going to play there, he's one of the fittest players in the United team, in the squad. There are, of course, issues with his end product and things like that, but is he a good player to have in the squad to provide competition, provide backup for that role? Absolutely he is. I think it's a little bit trickier when you look beyond Dalot, because Mazraoui, I would imagine, Mazraoui has had one game in pre-season, or one half, and he's been injured for upwards of a month now, since that Leeds United friendly in Stockholm, I think it was. So they've not got great cover there necessarily, but it's obviously a lighter workload this season with no European football, and they should be able to get by. Diego Leon is clearly going to stick around in the first team. He's not got a locker in the new dressing room at Carrington yet. He's in this. There's another changing room just down the corridor for players like I think it's the emerging talent changing room is the way they've built it. So players like him, Chido Obi, Sekou Kone, hopefully he's recovering and is in a better state than he was at Tamworth the other night. Those lads will be getting changed in there because, of course, they're training a hell of a lot with the first team at the moment. And Diego Leon is not an academy player at United. He's seen as someone a bit like Kone, playing second string football, and then we'll see how you get on, whether you're ready to make that leap up to the first team squad.
Samuel, what do you hate more than the word pivot?
There are a lot worse things in life.
Score predictions?
Well, do you know what? I was thinking about this because obviously this is the time of year where there are predictions galore that are not just score predictions, it's positional predictions. It's who's going to be the top scorer, who's going to be this, that, or the other. But there have been times in the past where we've had to do things for, not too sure what the projects were, but we did have to give top
nail our colours to the mast and do predictions. Yeah.
Yes,
well, for a bit of fun, do you want to end this podcast with? We'll start with our predictions for Sunday because that is the game coming up, and then for the season. So position. I'll start and say 3-1 on Sunday. I'm going to build on the positive mood and keep it going. That might be a bit delusional. We'll see. Probably end in a 1-1 draw, just like it did at Old Trafford. Was it back in March or April time?
Yeah,
and then in
March.
terms for the season, I think 6th or 5th. I think back in Europe, probably 6. And over to you.
I would say for Sunday 1-1, and I'd put United down for, it's either 5th or 4th. I'm just trying to think of what 3 teams or 4 teams would I have ahead of them.
Well, you think City and Liverpool, Arsenal,
City, Liverpool,
you'd think
Arsenal.
all 3. Yeah. Chelsea have had a very good summer, you think, although you can't read too much probably into that competition out in America.
Have they had a good, do you mean they've had a good summer in that they've won a trophy?
Yeah, I mean, that performance against PSG, again, it's pre-season, post-season, isn't it? It's very weird, so you can't really take solid conclusions from that, but I think they'll be good again.
The Infantino Trump trophy.
Yeah.
I've decided to christen it. Is it a bit no, I'm gonna. I'll be ultra positive. Well, put it this way. Given that the top 5 almost certainly qualify for the Champions League, my prediction is that United will qualify for the
Champions League. Yeah. And that would be a fantastic season after finishing 15th. So let's hope we can revisit this podcast and we're right. It's much more uplifting when there's positivity. Last season was a bit grim on that front, wasn't it? It was bad result after bad result, but let's hope for some wins. Samuel, thanks for your time.
Thank you, Stephen.
And thanks to listeners. As always, enjoy your weekend. Enjoy the game on Sunday. We'll be back on Monday to reflect on the performance. Take care.